All right. So one of the things that I love about Derek is that he practices what he preaches. So what more fitting than a series about creating margin than for him to take some time off for vacation? So while he and Julia are visiting family, you get some time from me this week. And it's been a while since I preached last, so if you don't know me, my name's Jason Smith, and I'm an elder here at Chapel. And just as God always does with me, He gives me something to preach about that is as challenging to me as it is to you. It's like He specifically picks out the area that I need to work on so that I study it more deeply so that I can teach about it. So this week, He's decided to take this guy who has never officially been diagnosed as having ADHD, who finds a new hobby pretty much every other week, to speak about focus. And focus is an interesting thing. It's like this slippery fish that you try to catch, and the more you try to catch it, the harder it is to find. It's like saying, don't think about elephants. And now everybody is thinking about elephants. Focus is kind of like that. So picture me last Sunday afternoon. I had planned to sit down, work on this sermon that I knew I really needed to work on. And 15 minutes later, I find that I just texted Kristen a YouTube video with Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell singing a viral 6-part harmony. So yeah, you and I get to focus on focus today. Before we dig in too deep, I figured we should start at the beginning. What is the definition of focus? So I looked it up. Focus is a center of activity, attraction, or attention. Focus can also be defined as a state or condition permitting clear perception or understanding. So when we talk about focusing on God, it's about making God our center of activity, attraction, and attention, and putting ourselves into a condition where we can better perceive and understand Him. The really interesting thing about today's message is there's about 1,000 things you can talk about in the Bible and bounce around all over the place to talk about making God the center of your activity, attraction, or attention. And there's even more than that that can tell us about how to have better perception or understanding of God. So quite literally today, we have to focus to be able to talk about focus. So we're going to narrow it down and talk about 3 things that we need in order to be able to focus on God. The first one, and it's one that we've been talking about for the past 3 weeks, is that focus takes time. Jesus gives us a great example of this in Mark 1:35, where we read in verse 35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And this is such an important thing for us to see because we call ourselves Christians, disciples of Christ. It means we try to do the things that Jesus did. We try to be more like Him. And in this example, if you read a few verses that follow up to this verse, you'll see that the day before, Jesus started in the synagogue. He taught there. He went over to the house of Simon and Andrew's home. He healed Simon's mother-in-law. And then in verse 32, that evening, after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed, and the whole town gathered at the door. So that's a super busy day. I mean, imagine yourself in that day. You start early in the morning at the synagogue, and you have that type of day, late into the evening. You're busy. But Jesus didn't just sleep in the morning after. He got up before light. He set aside the only time he had early in the morning, left the house to find a solitary place and prayed. Now, our houses these days in 2026 are probably a lot quieter than in those days, and we may not need to leave the house. I don't know your house. Maybe you do need to leave the house. And maybe the early morning isn't the best for you, but that's not really the point. The point is that Jesus took time. And as Derek has been encouraging us all to take 15 minutes out of your day, find a quiet spot and spend time with God. For most people, I think this practice requires scheduling time. You're not just going to randomly find 15 minutes a day, because you will fill up your day and find that you never took 15 minutes. Because in order for it to become a habit, you have to schedule it. So, I'm encouraging you to spend a specific time every day and schedule it. But if you read through the whole Bible, it's not just Jesus that took time. Moses spent 40 days with God alone on Mount Sinai. Elijah ran away from Jezebel into the wilderness and spent time in a cave, which is when he heard God speak to him in that still, small voice. David ran from Saul into the wilderness and spent time alone. And some of the most beautiful Psalms we read have come from that period. Paul, after encountering Jesus on the road to Damascus, spent years away before entering the ministry. And all these are powerful examples, in addition to Jesus, of really well-known people in the Bible who spent time focusing on God. Because focus takes time. So what time are you taking to focus on God? Real, dedicated time that you set aside to focus on God. Secondly, focus takes effort. As I found last Sunday, it's a lot easier to find videos of Ryan Reynolds than it is to focus. It takes effort to focus. Turning to Psalm 101, we can read about the effort that David had before he went into his kingly responsibilities. Psalm 101 was written by David either before he took the throne of Judah or 7 years later before he took the throne of Israel. And he understood that focus took effort. Starting in verse 1, we read, "I will sing of your love and justice. To you, Lord, I will sing praises. I will be careful to lead a blameless life. When will you come to me? I will conduct the affairs of my house with a blameless heart. I will not look with approval on anything that is vile. I hate what faithless people do. I will have no part in it. The perverse of heart shall be far from me. I will have nothing to do with what is evil." And we know that was written by David. And if you know the story of David, you know that he wasn't able to uphold everything that he just wrote there. But we can see that he understood that it took serious effort to follow the Lord in all of his ways. Because all of those words we read are active words. With the World Cup final last Sunday, I figured a good thing to talk about when you talk about effort is to talk about Cristiano Ronaldo. If any of you know Cristiano Ronaldo, he is a soccer player from Portugal, and he's well known for focus and effort. He's one of the best soccer players in the world. Here are a few things that he does differently. He consistently is the first to arrive and the last to leave during training. And he trains multiple times a day. He has chefs, trainers, psychotherapists who live with him to optimize his food schedule and rest. He doesn't sleep 8 hours a night. Instead, he sleeps 5 90-minute intervals throughout the day to optimize his time. And as he aged, he knew he wouldn't be able to rely on his speed, and so he changed his focus and he dedicated time and effort on positional awareness in the game. And this is just a few of the things he's done, and I could go on, but I don't want to make this about a man who's focusing on something that isn't God. But could you imagine if someone took all of that effort and spent it deepening that understanding of God? What would that person be like? Psalm 119 is the longest psalm in the Bible, and it's made up of sections. Each section in Psalm 119 starts with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the first thing I want to think about is that God's people were focused on God's word. Imagine being part of a culture that taught the alphabet by teaching a song to go along with every letter that's focused on God. I mean, that's amazing. The kids who grew up knew about God because they knew their alphabet. And in Psalm 119, 10 through 16, we can see the effort that we are to put in our focus on God. Starting in verse 10 of Psalm 119. I seek you with all my heart. Do not let me stray from your commands. I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. Praise be to you, Lord. Teach me your decrees. With my lips I recount all the laws that come from your mouth. I rejoice in following your statutes, as one who rejoices in great riches. I meditate on your precepts and consider your ways. I delight in your decrees. I will not neglect your word. But so far we've spent a lot of time talking about how we should spend more time and more effort in focusing on God. And while that's true, the most important thing you need to understand is we can't possibly do any of what I just said. We can't possibly do any of that without help. Even more important than that, the most important thing for me to mention this morning is that even if you were to give all of your time of every day and you were to put in as much effort into reading the Bible and prayer as Ronaldo puts into soccer, if you were to memorize the entire Bible and spend 10 hours a day just focusing on God, if you reject Jesus Christ as the Son of God, you have nothing. John 3:17 and 18 says, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned. But whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son." So we spent time talking about time, and we spent time talking about effort. But without faith in Jesus, it is impossible to please God. It's extremely important that we don't forget that. We don't start to think that our effort somehow earns favor, or we can be holy by just doing stuff. Because our actions can't somehow undo the brokenness that we've caused because of our sin. So, why then should we even focus on God? If all we have to do is believe in Jesus and we're not condemned, why does it matter what I focus on? Why focus on God? Why spend time seeking after God? Well, the first thing is, if you truly are a believer in Jesus, you already know why. You have this desire within you to know him more and build a relationship with him. And that's God's Spirit within us, urging us to come to him. John 6:44 says, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up in the last day. So when we place our trust in Jesus, we're transformed. We have this new heart, and we find out that we actually want to learn more about God. We want to find out how to focus on God, because that's God's Spirit working within us. So if you're like me, the things I'm talking about with time and effort, you're like, yeah, I want that. Not because it makes me holy, not because it earns me anything, but I actually desire to learn more about the mystery that is God. But as I talk about this, I'm saying that all of this comes from God. And in order for that, you need to put God as the center of your life. Because as the center, you can draw your energy, your endurance, your faithfulness. All of the ability to do any of this comes from God himself. Now, I've been through a really, really rough time at work the past few months. Really, really rough. And it's been frustrating. And as Kristen can attest, I lose my focus on God. And I lose track of why God has placed me where he's placed me. But here's the thing. God is in it even if I don't feel like it, or if I forget that he is. Several months ago, there was this guy who worked for me. He had some troubling medical situations, and he was really scared. And he called me up and he said, hey, I don't know what to do. I'm really scared. And I told him that I'd pray for him. And I did. And I've asked him for updates, and I followed up with him. And I know this guy has some faith. I know he believes in God. I know he believes in Jesus. I don't know what denomination he is, and it really doesn't matter if you both believe in Jesus. But a few weeks ago, he calls me up and he says, it's a miracle. Our prayers have been answered. We went to the doctor, and all of my symptoms are gone, and he found nothing. I have another guy who works for me who has some health concerns as well, and I told him I'm praying for him too. Am I worried about HR? My dad used to work in HR. He's not really that scary. So, is that why God put me in the job I'm at right now? Maybe. Would it really be that bad of a thing if God put me in a frustrating job because he wanted me to pray for somebody who maybe wouldn't have anybody else praying for him? Yes, and I've asked God to find somebody else. But so far he wasn't, and I need to be okay with that. Because my eyes need to be set on something else. I may be having rough circumstances, but I truly do believe that God is in control. And I need to place him at the center of my situation and not put my job there, not put my finances there, not put my family there, not put anything in the center that doesn't belong in the center. So where is your focus in your life? And we all know this, right? We've experienced the instability that comes with putting the wrong thing at the center of your life. You put your finances at the center and you have financial trouble, it affects everything about your life. You put your family at the center and you have trouble in your family, it affects everything. But if you set God as the center and you focus on God, that affects everything. If you know that he's in control, he helps you weather the storm. Just as Jesus said in Matthew 7, when he tells the parable of the wise man who built his house on the rock, when the rains came and the floods rose and the house didn't fall because it was built on the rock. But just like I said before, Jesus never taught in parables alone. He was the model. He showed us what it was like to do what he said to do. He showed us what it's like to have God as your center and how that affects weathering the storm in your life. In Hebrews 12, verse 1 through 3, we can read, "Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." And that's what we just talked about. Jesus is the pioneer, the first one who showed us how to do this, and the person who actually makes it possible. "For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." See, Jesus showed us what it's like to set God as the center of your life and put God and his plans in the forefront of your minds. It's impossible for us to do this, though, without making some choices and some changes in the way we live, in what we do. So first, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God, you haven't trusted him with your life, these actions don't mean a thing. First, settle your questions, settle your trust in Jesus, and then you will know what it's like to have the help of God in this. You'll know what it's like to set God as the center. But you can't do it without him. So, talk to me. Talk to an elder. Talk to somebody on the staff. Get that figured out before you leave today. Because without this, you're lost, you're condemned, and what you're doing doesn't matter. But if you have already settled that important choice, the first thing to look at is the one that we've been talking about the past few weeks, and that's setting aside time. Take 15 minutes a day. It's a small amount of your day to focus on God. Schedule it. Put it in your calendar. And say at 11:45 every day, I'm going to spend 15 minutes with God. And sometimes spend it just focused on God. Don't ask him for stuff. Don't pray about him helping you. Just focus on him. Secondly, put in some effort. It's not easy to read your Bible when you don't feel like it. It's not easy to put your focus on God. I don't naturally gravitate to focus on God. In my daily life, when I have some frustration at work, the first thing I do is try to fix it myself. Boy, I'll send off this angry email. Usually I type that in Notepad first so that I don't actually hit send, That's better, right? So what effort are you putting into it? We need to remember that God is a person, someone we can talk with, someone that is interested in us, and we're interested in them. My wife, Kristen, likes when I put effort into our relationship. She's a person. It shows that I care, it shows that I love her, and I like putting effort into our relationship. God also takes joy in seeing that we care, and we take joy in it too, because that's a personal relationship. And it does take time, and it does take effort, and that time and effort is enjoyable. So lastly, make God the center of your days and your life. Make God the one that your life revolves around, because everything else will be affected by it. And for me, like I've said, this is the hardest part. You want to make God like gravity so that your first thought when you run into something hard goes to God, not yourself, not your situation. And to do that, you have to have a habit of doing it. God needs to be your first thought. Needs to be my first thought. Because that's what grounds you in a way that nothing else can ground you. So, in a minute, we're going to transition to our time of the Lord's Supper. So I'm going to keep these guys on their toes to come up soon. I want to take a minute, and I just want us to stop and think about setting aside time, putting some effort into it, but mostly giving God the place that belongs, the center of our life, so that everything in our life flows out from that.